The tricky part is the technology and the sharing functions. And so this activity, like several Project Wild activities, we are developing these online versions that use Google Apps. And like the other activities, anytime you're using, for example, this Google slide that you'll have access to, you want to make sure that you save your own copy and change the name. I recommend you do it by accessing it through a Google account. So if you don't already have a Gmail account, I would recommend, after this session, open up a free Gmail account and using Google Chrome, the web browser Google Chrome, go to this session, this link that I'll give you in a bit, open it up, make a copy and save it into your Google Drive. If you're not familiar with Google Drive, this would be a good time to learn more about it, but it's a very intuitive filing system that Google provides for your Google Apps. And you'll make a copy, save it under your own name, and then anytime you teach using this Google slide, you're going to want to make yet another copy of the presentation that you can then share to the participants. All right, so as you can see at the bottom of the slide, I've given you two links. The first link is this tiny URL. That's the one you're going to need today. The second link where it says click here for master copy, if I got my copying and pasting correct, that's a copy you can access for later, and you will be able to access it once you go to this first copy of this presentation. So if you could now, if you haven't already, open up a separate browser, a window, go to this tinyurl.com/changeland, and when you get there, you will be on this page that I'm at. And while you're doing that, I'm going to, you can look on the shared screen at the top, there's this orange share button. I'm going to click that, and I'm going to make sure that it says anyone with the link is an editor, okay? So I've already done that. If it said anyone with the link can view the presentation, that would work too, but you wouldn't be able to type in it and make changes. For our activity today, I'm going to give you the opportunity to actually manipulate some of the content. And it might not be easy for you to manipulate the content for various reasons. And if it's not, we can work around that. I might be able to help you with that. All right. So you should be able to see the shared screen.
Can you add that? Can you put that in the chat?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Thank you for that reminder. That's something I intended to do, and that will help you all get to it more quickly. Okay. Okay, so there it is in the chat. All right. Now, Changing the Land has two student pages that I'll be reading. You won't need to get those now, but for the future, any page in Project Wild that says for students at the top, or what we call a student page, you can get to by going to projectwild.org and looking for Project Wild activity resources. So all of these activity names are from the Project Wild terrestrial guide, right? The K through 12 Project Wild guide. And you can see there's a link here for Changing the Land. And it looks like this. And it gives you the student pages for starters. It also gives you a lot of links for wild work job profiles and videos. In this case, there's many links like videos about being an ecologist or an urban planner or a landscape architect. So these professions all relate to this activity, and it's something that, if time allows, you may want to direct your learners to. But the student pages are also here for easy access, so you don't have to make copies of them or scan them in. They're here for you to use. And I have those pages open on my system. So I have student reference sheet A and student reference sheet B. I'm going to be reading these today, so you don't have to have them, but they're there, for you in the future. Okay. So this is what they look like. And I'm going to start with student reference sheet A and tell you about neotropical migratory birds. Almost 70% of the world's bird species are declining in population. Many birds are on the endangered, threatened, or watch lists in different states and countries. The rapid decline in the number of species of birds worldwide signals that the ecology of the planet is changing. What are the major threats to birds worldwide? What are people doing to try to protect them? You will complete a simulation that focuses on certain types of neotropical migratory birds. These birds breed and spend summers in the United States or Canada, and then travel great distances to their wintering grounds in Central or South America. The majority of the approximately 200 species of neotropical migratory birds are songbirds. The life cycle of these migratory birds are very complex. To understand the population changes of these birds, you must consider the breeding grounds in the north, the wintering areas in the south, and the migration path. Below are some of the major threats facing neotropical migratory birds: habitat fragmentation, nest predation, cowbird parasitism, urbanization, linear development, such as roads, pipelines, and high tower lines, loss of habitat, including summer, winter, and stopover habitat. In this activity, you will investigate how forest fragmentation might affect populations of interior forest migratory birds. Forest fragmentation is the breaking up of large continuous forests into smaller, isolated parcels separated by roads, fields, houses, and other development. Studies by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service have known that many forest bird species are rare or absent from small, isolated blocks of forest. It's difficult to determine the exact size of territory each bird species needs because it can vary by region and habitat types. Despite these difficulties, we do know that some bird species occur in habitat patches of all sizes, whereas others are moderately or highly sensitive to fragmentation and rarely occur in some small forested areas. And here are samples of each. So for an example of a moderate or high sensitivity species, we have the ovenbird, the Acadian flycatcher, the scarlet tanager, and the wood thrush. Examples of low sensitivity species: the red-headed woodpecker, the northern cardinal, the indigo bunting, the black-capped chickadee, and the blue jay. Wildlife research now shows that many species of forest birds require large blocks of habitat. Moderate to high sensitivity species avoid habitat on the edge of built communities and do not nest successfully near edges. Populations of these species generally do poorly in areas where habitat is broken or fragmented into small, isolated blocks. You will now look at two different scenarios for changes to a forest area and the effects of fragmentation on a wood thrush population. Okay, so a note, if ever you use this activity as part of, for those of you who are Project Wealth facilitators, and you use this activity as part of a larger training, over several hours or days, this is a great thing to assign as homework. So you can then launch into the next part of the activity, knowing that students have read this ahead of time. So this is the next reference page, Introduction to the Wood Thrush. And The wood thrush can be found in moist and shady deciduous forests throughout the eastern United States because the population has been declining at a rate of 1 to 2% each year for over 30 years. So for 50 years, it has been the subject of many ecological research projects. Research conducted on the breeding grounds has centered on the effects of forest fragmentation on nesting success. Forest fragmentation is the name given to the practices of breaking up large continuous forest into smaller isolated parcels separated by roads, houses, agricultural fields, utility lines, logging, and other development. Carving up forested area into smaller parcels creates more forest edge relative to forest interior. This process makes the wood thrush nest more susceptible to predators such as chipmunks and raccoons, blue jays, crows, and cowbirds. And the cowbird, as you may know, is a brood parasite that tends to select forest edges for reproduction and lay its eggs in other birds' nests. The foster parents usually raise the cowbird young at the expense of their own eggs and their own young. The Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center reports that wood thrush nesting success is greatest in large forested areas. Success rates decline in fragmented areas where the smaller forest size results in increased predation on eggs and young. So, most important point here is the wood thrush doesn't do well near edges of forest. The wood thrush needs larger expanses of undisturbed forest where there are not corridors or fields, agricultural fields or houses. Okay. So, finally, finishing up this reading, we have at the bottom of the page the Wood Thrush Creek scenario, present day. The area around Wood Thrush Creek has been forested for many years. The area is privately owned, and Wood Thrush Creek is an excellent trout stream. How many wood thrush nesting territories can be established in this wooded area? Place 1-inch circles on the map to represent a nesting territory. Circles may touch but not overlap. So this is a little miniature view of the Wood Thrush Creek map at present, and now I'm going to open up the larger copy of that. And you should too. And it looks like this on slide 3 that you can see on the shared screen. But what I invite you to do is open it up on in your window for the Google slide presentation that we're sharing. And I can see someone has already dragged in one of these, let's call it a 1-inch circle, right? Although it might not be that on your screen, but it's a circle that the size has been adjusted to fit with this size of map for this simulation of land use and wood thrush populations. And I can see people are starting to drag in these circles into the map, and that's good. So feel free to grab one by hovering over it, and when you see the little crosshairs occur, do a right click, hold down your mouse button, and drag it in. And that circle represents the area needed for a wood thrush nest, right? And so for a wood thrush to reproduce, it's going to need to build a nest in the forest. But it needs to build this nest not too close to other wood thrush nests and not next to houses or where a road cut goes through or a power line cut goes through. And in present day, this Wood Thrush Creek doesn't have any of those things, just a creek that's flowing underneath the canopy, right? And so it looks like we ran out of circles, so I'm going to take one and copy it. Oh, there we go. And there, okay. So how many did we get? How many wood thrush nests will fit there? Anyone? You can unmute yourself or type it in the chat. 12. Thank you, Mary, right? 12 wood thrush nests at present. Let's jump ahead. Let's jump ahead to Wood Thrush Creek future in 10 years from now, scenario A. Now here you can see in the key on the left, we have a paved road, okay, the parallel lines curving through the middle, going up and down. We have houses here, the little black rectangles and the little driveways that connect them to the paved road. We have this logged area down at the bottom. And then we have, well, we do not have yet a snowmobile or ATV trail. In fact, we don't even really need that on our map yet. Okay, so, and I've put some notes in the bottom, as you may see, for your use and my use, that say the owner has decided to sell some of the land. The owner also established a timber sale to provide some income in forest products, which are in demand. People are moving into the area and building homes. What are the changes in scenario A during the first 10 years? And what are the possible reasons those changes are occurring? So to answer those questions, before we do, let's see how many wood thrush nests we can fit in. So just like you did a moment ago, start dragging in the wood thrush nest, but remember that those wood thrush nests cannot overlap each other. They can touch each other, but not overlap, and they cannot overlap the road. They cannot overlap a house, and they cannot overlap the logged area. And now this is interesting problem we've had before. This map is blocking the view, so I'm going to do a right click on this map. Well, first a left click, then a right click, and I'm going to go to where it says order, and I'm going to go to send backwards and see if that helps. And it did not. Oh boy. Send to back. There we go. Okay. So now the circles you dragged in, you can see, you might need to reposition them. Okay, I see so far we got 4 nests. Can we fit any more? I wonder if this space right here could fit one. We're up here. We got 5. Can we fit any more? Almost. If I put one right there, and what if we move this one up just a tad? Yeah? Will one fit over here? No, not quite. Ah, looks like we might be able to fit one down at the bottom. Maybe if we move this up a bit. Remember, the circles can touch but not overlap. There we go. Ooh, still, it's close. So we can cross over the creek. What if we did that? Okay. Now, how many? We have, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 houses. Okay, and we have a tract that's been cut for lumber, harvested, the timber's been harvested. So how many wood thrush nests can we hold now? Or capacity? 9. Okay, so in the last 10 years with the building of 5 houses and a road, oh, wait a minute, we have a problem here. Up at the top, this is crossing the road and that's not allowed. So I'm going to take this one out. So that puts us at 8, okay? So just those 5 houses and the road and the area that's been cut has reduced our population. All right, you ready to move on to the next scenario? And that is, on the next slide, slide 5, we're at Wood Thrush Creek future 20 years from now. Okay, in this scenario, we have we're asking the same kind of questions. How do the changes affect the wood thrush? But we have more houses. How many circles can still fit in the forested areas if the circles cannot cover human structures represented on the map? Okay, so go ahead and drag them in. And I'm going to start. Oh, same problem. Let me see. I'm going to do a left click to select the map, right click and go to order, and then go to send to back. There we go. Okay. So I had to send the image, the map image, to the back, if you're wondering why the circles were not visible. I wonder if one would fit over here. And maybe up here. So the circles cannot cover human structures represented on the map, but they can cover linear things like snowmobile or ATV trails that pass under a canopy. Now, if it's a cut made for power lines, no. A wood thrush habitat would not be able to cross those, but in this map, we don't have one of those. We just have the creek, we have the ATV trail, we do have the road, and that was a swath of trees that was cut, right? And we not only have the main road, but we have two more roads that have been added in. Okay. So this is interesting. These two circles on the left and the middle, what do you think? Do those count? Anyone? You can type in your response in the chat, or you can unmute yourself. But I'm looking at the two circles on the left and the middle part of the map on the left. I'm not so sure. What do you think? The rule is they can't overlap each other or overlap where it's been cut, like a road cut. So here, in my view, it looks like it's overlapping. So that may, by our rules, these two would not be allowed, right? Unless we can reposition them. Like, can we squeeze this one down just a little? I don't know. I don't think I can get it to fit. Not quite, almost, but not quite. Okay, so I'm going to take out one of those circles. I'll be the referee, or I'll be the sensitive wood thrush in this case. Up at the top of the map, same thing, right? The circle is not fitting. So I'm going to take that one out. We did get two here. This one is okay. It's not touching the house. So how many do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're down to 5 nests now. So we only added one more house, but we added 2 more roads. And this one at the bottom, actually, that's questionable. I think it fits. Okay, we'll say it fits. Okay, so we're losing habitat in this area that is still might even be considered rural. Okay, on to the next scenario. I'm on slide number 6. Now we're looking at Wood Thrush Creek's future 10 years from now, but instead of scenario A, we're in scenario B. And in scenario B, it's a different kind of change to the area. We will decide where to put the houses and the roads and the other developments. And we're going to use the same number of homes and logged areas as in scenario A. We'll fill in the areas with our plans, and we'll provide for the maximum of forested areas large enough to support nesting. Okay, so in the key on the left side of the screen on the shared document, you can see underneath the key there are 5 black rectangles that represent houses. Those can be dragged in to the map. There's also a green rectangle, a square in this case, that represents the logged area that can also be dragged into the map. To represent the paved roads and the drives that we'll need, we can use, up at the top, you can see where my cursor is on the shared screen. I'm going to the tool that says line. If you hover over it, you'll see the little drop down that says line. I'm going to pick the curve, okay, the curvy line, and I can draw in. So I can hold down the mouse, and every time I click the mouse, it changes the curve, right? So I can, there we go. Okay, and now I'm going to double click, and I got my curve, and I'm going to select it, and I'm going to do a Control C and then a Control V for a paste, and then I'm going to reposition it. Oops, didn't want to select that. Okay, let me try this again. Nope, that's not it. I'm trying to select just the road. There we go. Nope. Yeah, it's cumbersome. Okay, let me try one more time. There we go. That's what I was after. Trying to make two parallel curvy lines here to represent a road. That will be our road. And you all can use that same tool to add in the smaller driveways to the houses. So if anyone would like me to change the road as we go along over the next 15 minutes, we can do that. Before we try to put any circles in, where do you think we should put the houses? Anybody have any ideas?
I would personally put them as far away from the creek as possible, just so that we keep that creek edge habitat.
Okay. Would you like to drag some over into there, or would you like me to help you do that? And how about some of you others? Do you think it's a good idea to keep the homes away from the creek, or anybody, wanting that perfect vacation cabin overlooking a creek?
I think we should cluster them into one area.
That's interesting. Why?
So that we can use just a couple of secondary roads to get to all the houses and keep open space for the wood thrush nests.
Okay. All right. I like the way you think. I've noticed that not everybody agrees, though. Some people like their houses to be far away from everyone else.
I would keep them on the like the top half of the road there, where that curve exists, like putting some in that area since it's not as large, and therefore like I maybe would only be able to fit one circle anyway in the top left corner. So using the spots where I'm not able to fit a circle anyway.
Okay, so assuming that the top end of this map is north, we're at the north end where maybe you're saying the space is more restricted in our available habitat, and maybe put some houses there where we might have trouble fitting a circle anyway. Okay. Okay. All right, so we've used up the houses, we got the logged area, and we can imagine, oops, let's try that again. I'm trying to get my curve here. There we go. Drawing in the driveways. Okay. Okay, now let's drop in the nests. And I'm going to mute myself for a minute while you all work on positioning the nest. Okay, so it looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 nests. All right, good. So 10 years passes in scenario B. The folks, who whoever was responsible for deciding where these homes were built had some foresight about how to maximize all the benefits, including wildlife habitat and the needs of the wood thrush. Um, Yet there's also this interest in over the next 10 years of developing an ATV and snowmobile trail. So we're going on to slide number 7. And by the way, in slide number 6, I took out that part of the key. But in this case, we're going to add it in. And as part of the items you can pull and manipulate, and I went ahead and put in a dotted line that you can drag in to the map, or you can go back up to that line tool at the top, and you can choose the curve or the scribble, and you can put one in, and then you can change the style of line it is using I think it's this function. Nope, that wasn't it. I don't remember how I did that, but we have one you can drag in. Maybe I can find it while you're deciding where to put things. Should we talk a few minutes about our strategy here? Any ideas about how you want to position the logged area and the houses? We have 8 houses, the logged area, and the ATV trail.
I had a question. This is Jessie. So I'm thinking of using this with older students, and have you done this with adding topography in or adding the surrounding mapping? Say, okay, this was a large untouched parcel, but all of this was around it. So they would know where the road started and where the road ended, but then they would have to draw the track of the road based on topography, and that type of stuff. Have you tried that?
I have not, although there's a little more to this activity that we'll get to that might touch more on that, but there's no reason you couldn't. In fact, you could use a topographic map, and create your own like creek, so to speak, and do the same thing. Or you could add in symbols that represent topography, differently than a topographic map would. And if you really were, if you really were into it, you could create your own topography using the topographic map symbols, which would be kind of fun.
Yeah,
And
thanks.
you could using these using the shapes, the insert shapes and ovals and curvy lines. Yeah, you could go to town. But there is a way to as I was saying earlier, I'm going to try it one more time, but to put in the curve, like, and then modify it to be the dotted line, but I'm sure you could modify it by the thickness of the line or the color of the line to represent different intervals of topography the way a topographic map does. That would be a great way to do that. Take some time, but it'd be fun. So I'm going to format options. I'll try that. Nope, that's not it.
So I since the slide before was scenario B from 10 years, but then this is scenario B of 20 years. Would you suggest keeping the paved road and the houses and the logged area that we did on slide 6 the same, and then the only thing that's changing is that we need to find a place for the snowmobile, or just
Oh,
do
right.
it
Good
twice?
question. You know, I have always done this activity where we just start from scratch.
Okay.
I'm looking back at the instructions to see if that says otherwise, but I don't think it does.
I would think that if you kept it the same and just copied in, yeah, like you did, just copied in our old map and had the students continue on from the old map and go to the 20 years. And then if you had time, go back and say, okay, now if you know now, now that you know that you'll only end up with X number of habitats or nesting sites, what would you have done different at the beginning, and show the need for long-term planning instead of just kind of as needed planning.
Yeah. And in our simulation earlier, we were allowing the habitat to go over the ATV trail, which I need to double check that.
I know that our wood thrush do nest around our ATV trail, in case that helps.
Yeah, I think it would depend too if the ATV trail, if there was logging done to make the trail, that would be the difference. If there's a swath, and that may be because I'm looking at the procedures and it's a little bit ambiguous there. So yeah, that would be a concern. It could be done both ways, but one thing that the instructions say is a 4-inch ATV trail, like make it at least 4 inches, which to me implies that that the activity originally was intended that way, that the ATV trail is a barrier, that it does create a barrier, that it fragments habitat. Otherwise, I don't think it would have been included. But, we could say, since we did it where it could overlap, I'm fine with that. So then let me ask the question, is there another way we could position the houses knowing what we know now to increase the habitat? Which I think is the question you were asking earlier. Earlier we had 8 nests. Can we get more than 8? And maybe we'll leave the ATV trail out of it for now. If knowing what we know now, can we reposition these houses? Any thoughts?
Sure, I think that makes sense. Do a sort of comparison exercise.
Or what about the logged area too? Can we reposition that? And really, I mean, could we reposition the road altogether? But just with the road where it is, and let's say the houses and the forest, how can we reposition those to increase habitat? So for example, and I'm going to speed it up here by jumping in because there's a part of the activity I want to get to before time runs out. What if we did, I like to call it co-housing, where everybody's neighborly and they want to live together, right? And maybe in the middle, they have a community space, where they have picnics and kids run and play, all right? And maybe that opens up some habitat. Okay, so now we can talk. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're still at 8. So if this road had been repositioned, that would be maybe a critical thing in getting, oops, thank goodness for Control Z. Okay, that would be a critical part of getting more habitat in. So, and then our road, of course, is going to be different. Um, in the directions, it's saying you need a minimum amount of road or area that's been cut for either a road or a trail. And so going with that 4 inches, it might be something like this. Right? And there might be reasons why the road goes this way. Maybe it's topography, or maybe there was a desire to be able to have access to the creek, or maybe it doesn't need to circle back, but there's lots of reasons the road might go this way. And so now we have, oops. Okay, there we go. Okay, we have 10 nests. You can imagine it's easy to mess up these Google slides when people are collaborating. If you ever need to go back, you can, under File, you can go down to, there's where you can go to version history, and then you can go to see version history, and then over on the right, it gives you different versions at different times. You can resort back to an earlier time, and they're usually organized by date. So if you had it open the day before the original version, you should be able to at least go back to that, or go back to use Control Z, or go back to another draft that you saved. Just be careful to save another draft. All right, let's move on. We're almost out of time. So here's a map in South Carolina, Seneca, South Carolina. And I took these images from Google Earth. I actually used Google Earth Pro. I dropped in a yellow tack here so you can, as a reference point, to see changes over time. And actually, I'm going to start off with this one. This is Seneca, New York in 1958. The same area, there's the yellow tack. There's some houses here. The orange area in the bottom is urban area. You can see highways. You can see, the major road, the major highway, and the smaller highways. And interestingly, on the shared screen here where my mouse is, you can see this Cane Creek, right? And a lot of wetland here and lines of topography, okay? So looking at that same map, here it is in 2004, all right? Same, there's the yellow tack. And what happened here? It's filled in by a reservoir, okay? And we can talk about why that is. Why would a dam have been put in to create the reservoir? And what happened to the land? What happened in this view, in this view? There's lots of time we could spend looking at that in the new roads, and then move on to 2018 and toggle back and forth to look at changes in the land. Okay, so interestingly, big area of green on the right continues on, but if we look closely, we can see, for example, where my mouse is now on this little peninsula, there's roads and houses coming in, but back in 2004, they weren't there, right? And so there's some habitat that's changed since then. And then going on, we can say, okay, here I am on slide 11. Where would you place 50 new homes for 2030? Where would you place these 2 schools in green, and where would you place the shopping mall? Would it be, and I should be able to drag these in. I'm having trouble with it. Well, there's a way to do it, but students can then drag them in, or they can reposition them and paste them in. And then finally, I wanted to say what you can, if you really like this activity and you really want to, you really want to geek out with it, try going to Google Earth and Google Earth Pro. It may be still a free download. There was some discussion at one time that it was costing money, but Google tends to give things away to educators. But anyway, type in a location. Anybody want to throw out a location? Okay, I'm going to pick one. A place I used to live as a kid, Carmel, Indiana. And then once you get there, okay, you can choose what you want to see. But what I want to see is going to the top where it says View. I'm going to click on this one great tool called Historical Imagery. So I'm going to choose that option, and up at the top of the screen appears a little window, and I call it the Time Traveler. And on the right side it says October 2020, and there's different points in history where there's been new images uploaded. I'm going to start by going all the way back to 1992, where we have the earliest one that Google has in its files. And you can see on the bottom of the shared screen where it's in black and white, that's the historical data from 1992 that they had, and it's overlaid here on the most recent image. Okay, and so, well, the black and white part, they didn't have it in color, right? And so now I can pick an area and drop a pin, and I'm going to pick, I'm going to place a pin right up here in this agricultural area. It looks like an agricultural field. And I'm going to zoom in, I'm going to change the time to 2019, May 2019. And now look at it, okay? Let's zoom in a bit. So I'm using the control, and I'm holding, oops, I didn't mean to do that. Oh, doesn't work that way. Let's see if I can zoom in a different way. Here we go, over here on the right. Okay, so now look at it. We have roads and subdivision, right? So a great tool for comparing changes in your community, make it place-based for your audience, and look at changes to the land and what's that done for wildlife habitat. If you're in the eastern United States, you could start looking at changes to wood thrush habitat, right? So you can find areas, of forested areas